All right, guys, here at the Hidden Why podcast, we've got Emma Livingstone with us today, and we're discussing her wonderful charity about cerebral palsy, or CP. I just want to jump into it, Emma. I mean, it's a wonderful thing that you're doing. Someone's, committing your life to helping others with that. I always, really value that and appreciate that. But can you explain to me what cerebral palsy is?
Yeah, so really, all it really stands for is kind of a brain injury that happens before, during, or after birth. Actually, they give children a diagnosis of cerebral palsy up until they're 2 years old. So it's something that happens in childhood. And for me,
happens through birth.
Yeah, it used to be thought it was because of a traumatic birth injury, but now researchers are telling us that it might be something to do with what's happening in the womb before they're born.
Right.
We don't really know, but it can affect somebody in very many different ways, depending on where the brain injury occurs and how severe that brain injury was.
Okay, so it happens before birth, so not from the trauma of birth, but...
So they don't really know. When I was born, it was because of trauma during birth, but now there's much more information out there and much more research looking at potentially why that might happen, or what happened during pregnancy that could have caused it too. So there's lots of different hypotheses out there. Right.
Okay. So when you're talking about some sort of brain injury, there's obviously levels of that then?
Yes. Yeah. And there's different people will present quite differently. And the actual brain injury that happens isn't progressive. So the brain injury that I got at birth is still the same, but living lifelong with it means that you can have a degenerative impact on your body. At least that's what I'm now finding.
Really?
Yes. And
I mean, you seem quite normal to me. Like, I don't see, how would you detect this?
I seem quite normal. Well, that's fantastic. So I have a problem with walking. I have a problem with my right arm and using it. So yes. So, and these things are getting slightly worse as I'm getting older. So
why do they get worse? Why is it degenerative?
This is the new information that everybody's finding out now. If you think about it, your body was designed to move in a particular way, and what the body is great in doing is adapting to using different muscles to help you move and get around. But if you use that all the time and you overuse it, then you get issues around arthritis, and you get issues with fatigue, because we know that somebody with cerebral palsy probably uses about 6 times more energy to move than somebody who doesn't have difficulty moving. So therefore there's problems with fatigue. Actually, all these conversations around long COVID that people are having now about muscle deterioration and fatigue and all the things that they're presenting with, very much similar to what it's like living long term with a condition.
Oh, okay. So you're saying the similarities there from being infected with COVID is that the lack of energy?
Well, I don't know if it's exactly the same, but the language that people are using it now to describe it is some of the symptoms that are similar to the CP community.
Okay, so you're saying part of your brain was damaged during or through birth or something, and that's caused a lack of movement. Did you say in your left side, or was it
in my right? Actually, in my right leg and my right arm. Yeah,
right leg and right arm. So does that part of the brain stay that way forever? Do you know?
Yes.
It does.
Yeah,
so throughout your life, your right side, your arm and leg, so you can use it. Obviously, you can move and.
I can now. As I've gotten older, I'm using crutches more, and sometimes I use a wheelchair to get around. But when I was younger, I learned to walk by the time I was about 3, and I was walking independently up until I was in my late 20s, when things started to go wrong a little bit for me.
Okay, is that because other parts of your brain take over, or is it because you're using, like, I don't know, more of your left side to do things? Like, what's happening there with the deterioration of that?
Well, actually, it's a really interesting question. Those are the things that I started asking questions about as somebody who was living with a condition, and there wasn't really very much information. What we think now is just, it's kind of overuse, using your body in a different way. We also know that we're more at risk of certain underlying conditions that could be causing a problem.
What do you mean? Sort of more risk at underlying?
So we're now finding that perhaps somebody with cerebral palsy might be more at risk of cardiovascular disease, or with arthritis, or with mental health issues. And we don't know whether that's environmental because of the way that we live, or whether that's because of some neurology, because it's a neurological condition. So we don't really know the answers to that. And as I say, even though it's the largest, well, definitely in the UK, it's the largest cohort of people with disabilities. There's about 130,000 adults in the UK with cerebral palsy, but it was considered a childhood disability. So when I was born, I was seen for physiotherapy and support until I was about 16. And then the doctors in their wisdom thought, right, well, we've got you to the best that you can be. And I was walking around independently, and I was going to school, and I went to university, and I did all the things that you kind of might expect. So they discharged me saying I was going to be the best I was going to be. And then what we are experiencing as a population is, as we get older and as we age, things start to get worse for us. And there wasn't the information and support out there.
Kind of makes sense, like, you know, to support you through those growing years. Because, you know, hopefully by the time you're 16, you're more independent and capable of doing your own research and, you know, self-support. But what you're saying is that you saw a need there for helping people beyond 16 and into their adulthood, continue with that support. Is that right?
Yeah. And definitely in the UK. Actually, in Australia, they're a little bit further ahead. But in the UK, there aren't any services to support adults with CP. So one of the things the charity is doing is lobbying our government and trying to show that actually with many other lifelong conditions, you can get support, but for CP, there is very little. So that's one of the things that the charity is trying to do. So we try and lobby the government and try and lobby policymakers to make a change so that there are more services available for people with CP.
Good work. Like your work. Did you set up this charity, did you?
Yeah, it kind of was born out of the fact that I was having difficulties and nobody that I could find could help me. So I started asking questions and finding out information. And then I guess the charity was born out of wanting to share that new information that I was finding with other people.
Yeah, wow, good on you. So can I ask you, and you don't have to answer me, but how old are you now?
45.
45. Well, you don't look that old.
Oh, thank you.
I would have thought younger than that. But so how long has this charity been running for?
So we've been running since 2018, although I think I made a decision on my 40th birthday. I think that I was sitting around with my husband. We were having some precious time, just the two of us, away from my 3 kids, and I was a bit frustrated. I just had another major surgery, and I was frustrated with the lack of understanding and support that I was getting. And he said to me, well, if you don't like it, do something about it. Which made me start asking questions.
What a great man. Hey.
He is a great man. He puts that with me.
Supporting you through that. So is CP mostly related to body functions? Is that what it affects? Or is, you know, can other parts of the brain get damaged to stop, you know, speech and, you know, all sorts of things?
Yeah. So I, you know, I count myself very fortunate that CP purely affects me physically.
Yeah, right.
Other people, it will affect their speech. It might affect their cognition, so their learning.
Just depends on which part of the brain is
affected. It depends. And also there's different types of cerebral palsy. So my muscles are quite tight. So it's called spastic. But other people are more floppy and flaccid and move around a lot. So there are lots of different presentations of cerebral palsy too. It really is a big umbrella term.
Well, I guess the brain's an important piece of the body, isn't it, to control most of our functions. So if you damage any part of that, you're going to have some issues there. It's amazing. I'm really intrigued about, you know, it'd be nice to know, I guess the science is probably looking into it, but how it actually occurs, you know, and what is happening before birth for that to happen.
I think the easiest way to describe it is that in some ways there's some oxygen starvation to the brain. So what we know about brain cells is once they die, they don't regenerate like the rest of the body. So in a way, because of oxygen starvation, for one reason or another, some of the brain cells die, and therefore you get an area of the brain that doesn't work properly. And what the brain is brilliant at doing is rewiring and helping you in some ways, but not in every way.
Gotcha. Okay, that's well explained. I had another question for you there. I've just lost it. So with CP, do you know the rough, like how many people are born with CP in the UK, sort of thing? Is it
it's about 1 in 400 births.
Okay.
I think the incident rate is, yeah.
But
what we know, because it kind of mirrors the aging population that we've got universally, that we think there's about 160,000 people in the UK at the moment with CP, and 130,000 of those are adults.
Gotcha. Okay.
So with the larger cohort is of adults, and historically it was thought that, like I say, that things didn't change. But the other thing that's changed with information and science is that we now understand that that life expectancy for somebody with CP is equivalent to the normal population, whereas I think historically it was thought that people might not live into their adulthood. So maybe that's why there wasn't services developed for them. But actually we now know that that's not the case. Okay.
Is there a shortened life expectancy for people with cerebral palsy?
No. So now we know there isn't. But I think that was the thought way back when.
Well, it sort of almost makes sense. I mean, if you say you're deteriorating in, your ability to move and stuff, that'll weaken other parts of your body and your immunity, maybe even. And
I think for some people that might be more severely affected, so if their lungs are affected and things like that, that might be the case, but it certainly isn't the case for the majority of people now.
That's interesting, isn't it? Wow. Okay. So with your charity, I mean, how does this work? How does your charity work? Do you actually do the supporting work for those people, or?
Yes. So I'm really passionate about giving people information and giving people the tools and the support to live a better life with the condition. So understanding that things like keeping moving, doing exercise, having good nutrition, and things like that are really supportive. And
more of a motivational sort of coaching piece.
Well, I guess I've got a coaching background, so I understand that, but I also think that that in order to live your best life, you have to have the most information about your condition, and you need to own it yourself. And if you, with that, then you can make the decisions and the choices for you. So I think, that it's a combination of two things. So we work really closely with the researchers to try and understand both about the condition for adults, but how to best help and support adults. And then we try and inform and educate the community about the ways that they can live in order to help themselves. We provide support groups and things so other people can meet other people with CP and share that support. And like I said before, the other big thing we do is to campaign and lobby for a better understanding of CP and better services. Because we know that there is a degenerative impact, but we also know there are things that we can do in order to stop that happening, or to at least slow that down.
Yeah. Raise a couple of good points there. I mean, I think generally, whether you have CP or not, if you understand yourself, your mind, your body, you need to take ownership of that. It's your vessel. You can't rely on others or external factors to try and help you with that. And if you can master that, which I still haven't mastered, and this is why I started the podcast, to try and figure out who I am and what I'm about, so I can self-improve and really help myself. But long way to go, but come a long way as well. So I think it's a life journey anyway, but I really like that. I think that's a really important point.
I think if you live in integrity, if you live with your beliefs, then I think that that's your purpose. And I think that, and I didn't realize this, but apparently a lot of the time that I say to people, you need to learn to own it, to actually own and accept you and who you are, and then other people will accept that. But you have to get comfortable with yourself.
And that's, for some people it's probably quicker than others, but that took me quite a long time, to get comfortable with myself. I don't know if I'm still 100% comfortable with myself, but I'm certainly a lot more aligned with that, and the integrity piece as well. I think that's really important too. And if you can figure those two things out, you'll just have a more enjoyable, experience in life.
Most definitely. I think the other thing that's really important for me is to appreciate diversity and the different things that people bring to the table. Controversially, I don't think that everybody's equal. I think everybody's different and brings something different to the table, and that we should celebrate that diversity. And the other thing that I think is that I don't know if it's happening in Australia, but here lots of people are talking about if you can't see it, you can't be it. So unless we have people out there showcasing the fact that you can live a good life with cerebral palsy, that you can be an MP, or you can be a comedian, or you can be a social worker, and you can live a good life, then there are people that need to see that. We need to see role models. We need to see people achieving, so that we can. I hate the word inspire. I don't like being told that I'm inspirational or that it's inspiration porn for other people, but I do think that people need to see role models.
Why don't you like inspire?
I like to. I think there is a difference between saying that you want to inspire people to live better and feel better and be the best that they can be, to when they see me living my life, apparently I'm inspirational because I've got a degree, or because I've got 3 children, or because I try and hold down a job. But for me, that's just living my life. That's not, I don't have a choice but getting up every day because I've got 3 children, and that's the choice I made, and I want to live a good life for them.
You're just being humble. Because it's easy to consider you as inspirational, because like you said, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So what people are seeing, they're going, wow, she's inspirational. I wish I could be more like that, being able to live with CP and doing all that she does.
Exactly. And I know, I think that's good. I just don't like being seen as inspirational just because I live my life. So I've just got a doctor's report who met me for 5 minutes, and his first line is, I think you're inspirational. But all I was doing was saying, well, I'm living with my kids, and I want to live pain-free if I possibly can.
Yeah, that's inspirational, man.
Well, that's fine. As long as it's used for the good, and that's fine by me.
Yeah. Do you think there's a lot of people with CP that are undetected or undiagnosed?
It's a really interesting question. The more people I meet now with cerebral palsy, the more I'm seeing people that didn't realize that that's what was going on for them till later.
Yeah.
And the other thing that went on, I hope it doesn't happen now, but that doctors made those diagnoses but didn't necessarily share them. So there are a few people that have found out that they've got CP later on in life, when things were going wrong for them, and they were seeking support from physiotherapists or people, and then they look back in their medical notes and someone had said something somewhere, but they hadn't communicated that. That's quite scary, I think, but it does happen.
It is scary. Yeah, it shouldn't happen.
But I think more and more, I would hope that the children that are born now, like the medical profession is different now, and there's a lot more openness and a lot more communication and a lot more people willing to make diagnoses than they were earlier. But I think that happens for people like me, perhaps, who presented as less severely. I mean, definitely if you've got CP and it was really affecting how you sit and how you move and how you eat, then those people would have been detected, because they need support throughout their lives.
Yeah. When you're talking to the adult community with CP, do you find some resistance there of what you're doing?
I found a lot of support from people saying, yes, these are my experience. Unfortunately, when I started looking for support and understanding, I found a community that was pretty disgruntled and dissatisfied and unhappy with the experiences that they've had, that no one's believed that things are getting worse for them, and there's very little support. But that, for me, having that attitude, although I completely understand it, I tried to approach it slightly differently and say, okay, I understand why you thought that we didn't need support, but now we understand that we do. Let's move forward, and let's move forward in a positive way. And sometimes that's difficult for people to accept, that I I don't hold the bitterness that others do, although I really do understand that, you know, if you've really struggled to get support and help, that that would be the way that you feel. But for me, that's not a useful feeling, or it's not. And don't get me wrong, there is times when I do feel like that, but I don't think it's useful for me to stay feeling like that, because it doesn't do me any favors.
Doesn't help, no. I was just going to ask another question about the resistance of people with CP, and as it relates to, so when you're, because as a member of society myself, I have no experience around this topic, because I have no exposure to it. I'm very uneducated, I suppose. So speaking with you today, I'm learning a lot. With people like myself that are very uneducated, what can we do to better understand the people with CP and therefore hopefully be able to better help out in the community with that too? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think historically the image, particularly in this country, and I don't know what it's like in Australia, but particularly in this country, people normally, when you talk about cerebral palsy, have an impression that somebody with cerebral palsy is very disabled, that needs lifelong support. And there is certainly a proportion of our community that do, but there is also a larger percentage of our population who are more able-bodied, like I am, and do have the abilities to hold down a job and to have a family, and to live, I don't like the word, but in inverted commas, normal life. And what I'd ask of society, I suppose, is to embrace the difference and the qualities of the people that have lived a slightly different life bring to the table. That you know, I worked for a very long time till I couldn't as a speech and language therapist, and working with other people with disabilities, I brought some empathy and understanding to the table that other people wouldn't have brought, and that having people with diversity in your community brings richness, and that I think, unfortunately, because of legislation and because things are the way they are, sometimes people with disabilities are seen as a tick box, that we've got these in our community and we have to account for them, but actually that's going to cause us a problem. And whilst people with disabilities are seen as somebody that we just have to accommodate and we have to make extra allowances for, which you do, and you don't see the positive of having somebody with diverse, rich experience of life in your organizations or in your life, then if you don't see the positive, then you're always going to be resentful, even if you aren't consciously, you are subconsciously.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even know how to, I guess, because would you come forward and let people know of your condition? Like, is that something that you do? Like, I couldn't imagine you would, but maybe it's something that
well, I do now. My family actually laugh at me, because until I was about 25 or 30, when I said, I didn't really talk about the fact that I had CP. I went to a mainstream school. I had a mainstream life, and yes, I walked slower than everybody else, and I fell more often, but I just got back up and got on with it, and I didn't really talk about it. It was just something that I was dealing with, and I didn't want to be seen as different. But now I've learnt to own it as a condition. And,
well, again, like you said before, owning yourself is important.
Exactly, and learning how to ask for help was a really big step for me, and it is for many of us in our community, particularly those that have gone to mainstream school and, you know, mixed with other children who potentially didn't have difficulties like them. We've always tried to be the same or be better to prove our worth. I think the other members of my community that I support, who perhaps went to special needs schools and things, have always lived in a community where people were different and those differences were embraced, and they find that a lot easier.
Yeah. Do you feel like can a lot of other people with cerebral palsy relate to your experience of not really telling people that you had it during childhood and you tried to hide it and cover it and just fit in? Yeah.
There are definitely lots of us out there.
Yeah.
We started running some support groups during COVID when people were very isolated. And lots of people that we meet say, I've never actually met anybody else with CP before. Isn't it amazing to say, oh, you know, I've had similar experiences, and actually the value of meeting somebody else who's more like you. People have got a lot out of that. So yeah, there are definitely people like me that, you know, were in the minority growing up.
Yeah. How did that make you feel, like experiencing growing up with CP? Was there anxiety issues there or anything that you struggle with? I mean, you sound like a pretty strong sort of woman with a pretty high level of
I am now. I think I'm very different than I was as a child.
You'd hope so.
I think I was quite anxious. I always set the bar very high for myself, and I always felt like I was trying to keep up, both physically and metaphorically. But I think I've grown in confidence as I've gotten older, and I think as you get older, you find more your kind of people. And like I say, once I became, actually the change came for me when I went to university and I met a group of people who didn't have disabilities or anything like that, but they were just quite willing to accept me for who I was. And then once you meet those kind of people, then it's okay to say, actually, you need to slow down when we're walking down the street because I can't keep up, or, you know, can you hold my hand down the stairs because, you know, I'm finding that difficult. I mean, but I didn't have that in terms of my family. Growing up, I had a really supportive family. So I only felt those things when I was outside the kind of comfort and shell of my family, because in my family we just kind of got on with it. If I fell over, they picked me up and carried on down the street, you know. It was just kind of that kind of mentality that it wasn't going to hold me back, and that certainly stood me in good stead. No,
I think it's and it takes courage to ask for help, doesn't it? And whether you got CP or not, I think everyone needs to learn how to ask for help.
Most definitely. I'm not saying that any of the things that I learned are purely because I've got a disability. I think it's helped, but I think some of these things would help everybody. I think.
But we try to hide, you know. We just try to save face or ego, protect the ego, maybe, and you know, we don't want to ask for help. And it's a very hard thing to do. It's a very hard thing to go up to someone and say, "Hey, can you assist me in this way?" Whatever way that is, you know.
You know something, when I was in Australia, I traveled in Australia for a bit when I was younger. I was in my late 20s.
Backpacking.
Backpacking, yeah. And actually, you guys have a very different mentality. So actually, one of the places that I started to change the most was living in a community where I'd walk into a bar in Australia and someone would go, "Hey, what have you done?" And I'd look at them, what do you want to know for, and why are you asking? And it's none of your business, because it's a very British mentality not to ask and not to inquire. But actually, once I realized that people they were interested, but they didn't really care, if you know what I mean, that they were just being open and honest and just asking because they were inquisitive. And I started freely talking about it. Then I realized that this is okay. It's okay to say that that's the problem. In fact, I learned to scuba dive out in Australia. And one of the things the guys had to do when I got in the water was put weights on my ankles because I couldn't get the buoyancy. And so I trusted him enough to like put weights on the bottom of my ankles
scary,
and be at the bottom of the ocean. But it was a real kind of learning for me that if I actually told people what was wrong and what was difficult, then actually I could experience more, not less.
Yeah. It was funny. I just went to a Kenyan experience recently. So I'm 40 now, and it was for a mate's bucks party. And we went to this canyoning experience. Now, I've always been a young kid, and with all my mates, we just jump off cliffs and all sorts of crazy stuff. Anyway, we had to jump off a 16-meter or 22-meter high cliff into the water. And I'm a bit fearful of heights now. And I just voiced it to, you know, the group. There was, you know, 15 of us, blokes. And so voicing that to a bunch of blokes, you'd think, oh, geez, but I just voiced it. And it was interesting to see how they responded and how they treated me throughout the thing, very supportive.
Yeah.
Totally unexpected. But and I didn't bring it up because I wanted to have that attention or the support. I just was being honest, like, hey, this is how I feel. So it's interesting that, you can sort of voice things and people don't also care, but they do care, I think.
Yeah, and I think the other experience I had, which was a real game changer, with me was that I jumped on a tour with a tour guide when I was out there, and we were going to Uluru, and I said to them, guys, like, this is great and it's fun, but when we get there, I'll sit in there. I can't do that distance walking around. So if you don't mind, I'll stay in there. I'll come and see it, but I'll stay in the van and I'll meet you back afterwards. And the guide said to me, well, why aren't you even going to give it a go? And I said, what do you mean? He went, here's the keys, do as much as you can, and then we'll meet you back here. And we were on the trip for a week, going to different places. And, every day I just did that little bit more, and I challenged myself.
Yep.
And he kind of changed the way that I viewed things, just slowly. I think change happens really slowly, and it's only when you look back over time you can see those points in your life where actually you had a slight mind shift, and then that's helped.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that I ever did, and it sounds like you're the same, was travel overseas when I was young. And I don't know, I think it's that just quite dramatic change of culture and environment that puts you out of your comfort zone in so many different ways and teaches you so many different things. It was a life-changing. I went to Japan for three and a half years, and that changed my life. And I say to all young people, they're all driven for careers and this and that. I say, if I was you, I'd just go traveling for as long as you possibly can. Life will be here when you get back.
Yeah, that's what we say to our kids. I've got 3, and we're kind of waiting to chuck them out into the real world. Like, not that I want them to leave home, I love them dearly, but I can't wait till they experience the world. And I just hope that with COVID and everything that's going on, by the time they're ready to go, then they get as much freedom as that we were able to get. Yeah.
And I think the earlier the better too. I think if I think nowadays we're such helicopter parents and we're so restrictive to what we allow, because I don't know, we're more scared or something. I've got 2 young girls, and my wife's almost the opposite to me. She's very fearless, I guess, whereas I'm a bit more protective, and so I have to learn to be not so protective. But I grew up that way myself. We used to just, on the weekends, see you later, and me and my mates would just be cruising around in the suburb, all weekend, doing whatever we could. But that sort of experience is absolutely different to what the experience I'm seeing kids having now, which is in-home, indoors. Oh, you can't go anywhere. Where are you going? Being watched, constantly. And it reminds me of a story I read from Richard Branson. I was a bit of a fan. I still am a bit of a fan of him. And, he said his mum gave him that experience where she just really pushed him to be independent as soon as they could. And he's got stories of where he got dropped off and had to find his way home at a very young age. And that one story just sat with me going, that's what we need to be doing. And that's what I felt like when I went to Japan. I was just dropped off and had to find my way.
Yeah, there's nothing like landing in a strange country. I mean, I was lucky because when my first kind of trip away alone was Australia, where it was English speaking country, but there was nothing like landing. I remember landing in Perth thinking, okay, I don't have anywhere to stay, I don't know where I am, and I have a map. This was before everyone had mobile phones, and I just got to survive. But it's like all experiences. I do think that people need to be encouraged to jump off their comfort zones occasionally, because then that expands your comfort zone, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I think that's what we need to do for our kids.
Yeah. How old are your kids?
So my oldest is 13, and then I have one of 11 and one of 8.
Nice. Cool. So what can people do to support you, and how can they find out more about you and your charity?
So you can check out our website, which is adultcphub.org. and have a look at the stories, and have a look at our campaigns. And for other people that have got cerebral palsy, we hope to have some resources and support networks for them. If you're listening in the UK, then please tweet or talk to your MP about asking why there's such health inequalities for adults with CP in this country.
Nice.
And just kind of show your support. That would be brilliant. And remember, if you've got somebody with a disability, that they actually bring a richness of experience that actually can benefit you.
Love it. Guys, check it out. Make sure you reach out. I'll stick the links in the show notes for this episode. It's been great to have you today, Emma. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, and have a great day. I'm about to go to bed.
It's probably late there, isn't it? So guys, check it out, thehiddenwhy.com. Until next time, peace, passion, and purpose. See you soon. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Really nice to meet you.
That was good. Hey, enjoy your night. And